In today's video, we are going to bring a recap of a romantic and comedy Korean show called What's Wrong with Secretary Kim. Lee Young-joon is the vice chairman of the Yuman company. He loves himself and doesn't care about anything. But one day, his world is turned upside down when his highly competent secretary Kim Mi-so announces her resignation after working 9 years for the company. Young-joon then decides to do whatever he can to make sure Mi-so stays by his side. Young-joon has risen to the position of the vice chairman. He is well known for his good looks, perfect body posture, and competence. He never lets any woman touch him. There is one who always confuses him, and she is none other than his own secretary, Kim. However, she is capable of adapting to his habits of working quickly and perfectly. And thanks to her, all of his work is going really well. They both head to a fancy party where we see Young-joon talking to various foreign guests about his company in several languages. After the party, Kim reveals that she will be quitting her job for some personal reasons and wants him to hire a new secretary. He looks at her in disbelief but tells her that he's okay with it. But later that night, he lies awake, tossing, turning, and wondering why he can't sleep. The next day, he visits Yoo-shik's office, obsessing about why Kim might be quitting. He's upset because he usually figures her out, but this time he has no clue what she's thinking. That night, Kim has dinner with her older sisters, and she reveals that she had paid off all their family debts, and now she's quitting her job because she wants to spend some time on herself. Meanwhile, Young-joon is still cranky over her resignation, and all of a sudden, he concludes that Kim must have feelings for him. He immediately calls her to drive him home. When she arrives in his location, he gives her some flowers without knowing that she is allergic to pollen. She sneezes right in his face and gets out of the car to put the flowers in the trunk, but he is still convinced that she likes him. Later, he asks about her plans after resigning the job, and she says that she wants to live life not as someone's secretary, but as herself. Her remarks perplexed him, and he stayed up all night thinking about what she said. He arrives at the office in a terrible mood and conducts an interview for the new secretary alongside Kim. Instead of a normal conversation, both of them aggressively jab at each other disguised as interview questions, and he hires Jaya on the spot. He asks Kim to give an explanation of her remarks from last night. So she tells him that she wants to focus on herself and get married. Later that night, Lee shows up at her house, and what's even crazier is that he proposes to her so she doesn't need to quit her job. Later, we see Lee reporting to Yoo-shik that he had proposed to Kim, but she thought that he was drunk and didn't take him seriously. Lee assumes that maybe she wants a fancier proposal, but he just can't wrap his head around Yoo-shik's conviction that she has rejected him. Yoo-shik gets curious and asks him if he likes Kim romantically, but he declares that she's someone he needs, and by saying that, he quickly leaves before he can ask him any more questions. The next morning, he meets Yoo-shik again, and he advises Lee to put forth effort and make her happy. In other words, he advises him to date her. He is unhappy about it though, but he is determined to do whatever it takes to make her stay. Later, the team is having dinner, but Lee suddenly shows up and makes everyone awkward. Kim tries to get rid of him so that they can resume their fun, but he continues to stay and moves the party to a fancy place. On their way back, he tells Kim that he wants to date her. However, she politely denies it and wishes him luck in finding someone wonderful. After that, she goes inside, but he continues to text her. However, she becomes honest with him and tells him that he is selfish. That night, Lee has a horrific nightmare about his traumatic past memories. Later, he meets Kim in his office and admits that he is selfish and tells her that he'll let her go, but he asks her to stay for 1 month to train her replacement. With that, he turns his back and leaves her confused. He starts to help with Jaya's training and makes Kim feel left out. But it turns out that he hasn't given up on her yet, and he is just using his tactics to convince her. Later, Kim gets a call from Yoo-shik, who asks her to meet him the following evening. And when she arrives at the location, she finds Lee, who is apparently here to give her a farewell gift. But he is actually here to convince her regarding the resignation. The two enjoy the evening as Kim is happy to ride a carousel, while Lee is even happier to see her enjoying it. They have dinner together, and in the middle of their meal, he tells her about his elder brother and how he used to make things worse for him. He changes the topic, and then he takes her to the Han River, where he has arranged fireworks for her. Lastly, he gives her a huge stuffed cow, but she tells him that she won't change her mind despite all these gifts. Later that night, she sleeps snuggled up with the cow and dreams of herself as a young child, playing with someone she calls Appa. He says he has to go, but he'll come back to see her again. She forgets his name and only remembers that it starts with Lee. Kim heads out on a blind date with Byung-hyun, who happens to be a news reporter. She takes advantage of it and asks him to investigate her kidnapping case that happened in 1994 during the construction on Yuman land. The next day, she notices Jaya reading a book by her favorite author, Morpheus, whose books are all bestsellers and have been made into popular movies. No one knows how he looks because he has never shown himself publicly. Things are getting interesting as he is headed back to Korea, and he is actually Lee's older brother, Lee Sung-yeon. The track meet event begins at the company, and Kim wins her first race effortlessly. Then she is approached by her fellow partner for the three-legged race. Lee observes them and gets a jealousy fit. The race begins and the two put their arms around each other to make running easier. As they win the race, Lee gets up from his chair and declares that there will be no more track meets, saying that he trips and twists his ankle. Kim takes him to his house, and when she tries to ice his ankle, she sees a horrifying scar that goes all around his ankle. He quickly distracts her and starts to discuss the track meet. He receives a call from his brother, who is coming over to his place. Lee doesn't want Kim to meet Sung, so he asks her to leave. Then, Sung appears at the scene, and he's apparently here to forgive Lee because of a traumatic event that happened when they were kids. Now we see where it is going. His scar might be related to the incident. Anyways, Lee is clearly not happy to see him, so he asks him to leave. The following morning, the company is in a tizzy because they have to open their art center earlier than usual because the rival company has purposely moved their date. Everyone is panicking, but Kim is calm as usual, and she takes care of everything. She visits the library with Lee, where they will be opening the art center, but unexpectedly, the lights go out. However, the two get to spend some quality time together, and it is surely the best day for Lee. The next day at the office, she has the idea of kicking off the opening of the art center by inviting Morpheus, but she doesn't mention his name to Lee since she has no plan regarding it. Later, Lee visits his parents' house for dinner, but the family gathering is quickly ruined when the brothers have a fight over the unrevealed past event. Lee gets hurt, so he goes to see Kim right away. She treats his wound, but some romantic thing happens and they accidentally collide. The next day, Kim meets Sung and gets to know that he is Morpheus. She invites him to the art center's opening ceremony, but he takes some time to think about it. Whereas Lee gathers up his courage and decides to confess his love. He asks Kim to have a glass of wine with him that evening. She is confused though, but still excited. She shows up at the location, but Sung appears and tells her that he will be coming to the art event. He gives her his book and his autograph, which makes her very pleased. Suddenly, their conversation is interrupted by Lee, who is furious to see them together. He rejects his invitation to the arts center and makes Kim upset. However, the next day, he realizes his mistake and agrees to have Sung at the event and tries to get an apology from Kim, but she is not interested though, but she continues to ignore him. Later, an employee informs her that Sung is Lee's elder brother, and she understands why Lee was so upset last night. She then visits Lee, and both of them apologize to each other. Romantic events resume, but Lee suddenly stops as he recalls his nightmare and pushes Kim away. The next day, he takes her out as an apology and does everything she likes to make her happy. The two make up and she reassures him that she'll be back at work. On her way to the office, she gets a call from Byung-hyun, who informs her about the kidnapping. From here, the story takes a twist, and it turns out that the son of Yumin Group's chairman was abducted back in 1994 alongside Kim, and the two were locked up in a house. She thinks Lee is the one who was with her, but he tells her that Sung was the one who was kidnapped. She gets disappointed and continues to believe that Lee is not her childhood love. She meets Sang, but he has no traces of her regarding the incident, so she decides to help him in order to recover his memories. Whereas Lee isn't happy about them getting close, so he calls her back, and when he drops her back home, he asks her to date him, but she denies it again as she thinks he wants a relationship just because he is jealous of Sung. The next day, the whole team heads out for the workshop, and Lee joins them as well. They play a game to collect the most ribbons hidden in the mountains, so they pair up, and obviously Lee pairs up with Kim. He even gets his heroic moment when he saves her from the rain. They enjoy the view until Kim spots a spider and gets terrified. He kills the spider and calms her down. Then he gives her a chocolate to relax, which reminds her of the time she was locked up and how her appa gave her a chocolate. As they arrive back in town, Lee arranges a date for Kim, but their romantic event fails again because of his nightmare. Yushik also arrives and the two jump apart. On her way out, Kim realizes that there is something wrong with Lee. She's not wrong though, as the next day, Yushik tells her that Lee has scars on both ankles, and it looks like he was tied to something. Later that day, Lee sees Kim's old journal, which she dedicated to her appa, who was with her during the kidnapping. At this moment, it seems that Lee is keeping a secret that he was actually the one who was kidnapped with Kim when they were young, but somehow he said that Sung was with her. At the book concert day, he sees Kim with Sung and misunderstands the situation, but Kim explains everything. After that, she musters up her strength and admits that she likes him. Then they finally share a passionate moment. With that, today's recap comes to an end. We hope you enjoyed this romantic and comedy Korean show. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel.